Hey guys, today's question comes in and it's a common question about going through prep and reversing properly. And this question is, could you go over what to do and tips on building up metabolism after a bad prep of being on low calories and high cardio? My weight and fat mass has shot up after prep, and even months later, I'm still on super high cardio and relatively low calories, but I want to lean out and start another prep soon. So this is a common problem that people have with going from really hard preps to coming out of preps and maybe coming out of preps incorrectly right away. And that's usually the cause of this. So first, let's address that. Okay, so after a prep, you've been dieting really hard, you've been doing your cardio really hard, you're very sensitive to gaining body fat. Okay, that's going to be the most sensitive time you are to gaining body fat because your body is completely undernourished. You're working really hard. You're likely close to being overtrained, if not overtrained. And your body just wants to recover. It wants to store some more body fat and get back to its normal levels again. But understand that your fat cells are just waiting to soak up body fat again because you've been starving them off for a while now, right? So let's say you got to 1,000 calories or 1,100 calories and you're doing an hour of cardio, but then the show's done and you're like, okay, the show's done. I want to relax. I want to have some meals with my family. I want to enjoy it for a week or two, whatever. And that week or two turns into a month. This is usually what happens, is that you go from 1,100 calories to something even realistic, like let's say 2,500 calories. But then your cardio, you're like, I'm not going to do cardio for right now. I'm just so burnt out. I'm going to give myself a week. And then it turns into 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? So what happens is you gain body fat back in that month. And remember, even though you're only eating 2,500 calories, you doubled your calorie intake plus, and you lowered your caloric expenditure by a mile, right? Actually, by more than a mile, really. And so now you're in a place where you're able to gain body fat back way faster than you would have gained it back had you have not done the prep because your body wasn't adapted. So for example, if you ate 2,500 calories before and didn't do any cardio, you probably wouldn't gain that much body fat, maybe a tiny bit. But when you go from doing a whole bunch of cardio, let's say an hour, maybe even 2 hours of cardio, eating 1,100 calories, and your body is now used to that. That's the new setting of the body. And then you do 2,500 calories and don't do cardio. Well, now that's a big impact. That's a big surplus from what your body's used to. And your body is somewhat adapted to those really low calories because you're on it for a long period of time. So what happens usually in this scenario is that people will say, oh, I don't feel comfortable again. I want to lose this body fat. I want to jump back into a prep so I can lose this body fat. But what happens is you went through 16 weeks, maybe 6 months of dieting down, and metabolically, you're a little bit more adapted. Hormonally, you're a little bit more adapted to the lower calories, to the higher cardio. And then you only gave yourself 3 weeks or a month, and maybe you gained 10 pounds or so. And then your body is still not back to where it was 6 months ago or 16 weeks ago. So you're still really susceptible to gaining back body fat, right? So a month goes by, you gain, let's say 10 pounds in that month, and now you want to lose it because you're feeling a little soft and you're like, oh, I want to get this off of me. Well, understand that you're still not fully reversed metabolically and hormonally from the damage you did 16 weeks, 6 months long of being on these high calories, on these low calories and high cardio. So you're not just going to snap back and say, okay, I'm going to start dieting again. So now you're essentially starting your diet again, maybe something similar to week 12 of your prep. So of course, it's not going to come back off of you quicker or as quickly as before because you're now already starting from an adapted state. So how do we do this and how do we avoid this? And it's an unfortunate truth. You really need to manage yourself after the show. You need to introduce calories slowly. Now, here's the thing. When I say slowly, I don't mean like crawl up 100 calories a week. I say get back to your maintenance calories right away after a show, but understand your maintenance calories have shifted from when you started your prep originally. So maybe when you started your prep, your maintenance calories were 2,000. Well, after a hard 16-week prep, after a hard 6-month prep, maybe your maintenance calories are somewhere at the 1,400 calorie range. Don't cut your cardio to zero. After you get done with the show, maybe reduce it, 30%, 50% in some cases, but don't just all of a sudden stop your cardio, double your calories, start introducing high fat diets and things like that where you're really susceptible. And if you can slowly creep your way up from there and still do your check-ins, that's going to be how you're going to avoid this cyclical situation that people run into where they're dieting really hard, they gain back really quickly, then they try to diet it off, now they're more adapted, and then they gain it back again really quickly, and you see these people yo-yo all the way through. And in a bodybuilder yo-yo, it's more extreme than usually someone who's not a bodybuilder. Usually it's more extreme than someone who's just a weight loss person in terms of the yo-yoing. I've seen just women who are 5'5" gain 30 pounds right after a show 2 months later and then try to diet it off and it doesn't work because they're still adapted. So the key is how you come off that first few weeks after the show. And instead of thinking of your prep as, let's say, 16 weeks, think of it as 6 months. So if you're doing a 16-week prep, think of it as 6 months. 16 weeks of getting ready for the show, 8 weeks of coming out of the show. Those 8 weeks of coming out of the show is still you increasing calories and whatnot. You can still build muscle during that time, but it's not just like pure freedom where there's no more prep. Like you don't, just because the show ended doesn't mean it's pure freedom after that. You still have to monitor your calories, you still have to do your check-in. So just think of your prep as about 50% longer than the actual show date, and you should be fine if you come out of that correctly. Now, let's say you're in that situation where you're trying to increase your calories and it's still not working. That would be the time where I would say, let's say it goes like 8 weeks and you're still not able to get those calories up. You're still not, you're still having to do a lot of cardio just to maintain your weight. That would be a time I'd say, okay, go get your labs drawn. Let's see what's happening hormonally. There are things that can happen. Your thyroid levels could be a little lower. Your testosterone levels could be a little lower. Maybe something weird's going on with your estrogen levels. Let's just eliminate that as a possibility and then move forward from there. But if everything's fine there, it should be just a simple process of slowly decreasing cardio, slowly increasing calories after you hit your maintenance calories, and then monitoring your body fat, monitoring your measurements to make sure that as you're increasing your calories and decreasing your cardio, you're not gaining body fat. Because the goal of the off season now should be, look at my physique after the show, look at what I need to work on, and start building in those key areas while getting my calories as high as possible and getting my cardio as low as possible to set me up for success during my next prep. But it should never be do a show, gain a bunch of body fat, try to recapture my body how it was during the show, and going through this constant yo-yoing. You'll never get anywhere like that, and eventually you'll just phase yourself out. So easier said than done. I know it's probably not exactly what you want to hear, but that's the reality of this one. And you see so many people going into that cyclical cycle of just gaining back, cutting, trying to get back to their last body, gaining, repeating. And it's like that happens nonstop for 2 years and then they're done. So hopefully that you don't fall into that same trap. If you need help, we're here. TeamElitePhysique.com for worldwide prep. Let me know if you have any questions. Keep them coming in. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.